1, 2. Well, let's get started. First off, my name is Mike Jacobs. I'm from Hamilton, New Jersey, despite what anything else says on all your information. On my right is Kathy Davenport from California. And Kathy's done this panel in the past, and when I was asked to do it, I initially thought that I was going to come here and be the poster child for dealing with and I wasn't quite sure of why I was, but then when I got to realizing that we are constantly doing that in the course of calling, whether it's from behind the microphone and how we help that one dancer that needs our help without showing everybody else that we helped him, or dealing with difficult situations that come up. We spend so much, sometimes our dances feel like that we do 10-minute tips and 9-minute rebuttals. And we do get into that kind of thing. And part of it is because of the game nature of our activity. I mean, it is the most unique game in the world in that none of the team members meet each other until 3 seconds before the competition begins. Now, we don't view our activity as a competitive activity, but there is an aspect of competition. There is the aspect of how people feel about how they dance, when they get upset about mistakes that they make and they internalize them and so forth. So it's that kind of effort that those people are making in order to be able to enjoy their activity. So we already have a situation that's fraught with what are all these other people thinking about me, all of the adrenaline situations that any sport activity comes up with, and that leads people to the edge of their emotions. And we have to deal with that kind of environment. And not even to mention the times of differences in policies and how you feel about things and so many other interpersonal things that go on at a dance, that it is constantly an interpersonal situation that we're dealing with out on the floor. Now, we try to create an environment of friendliness and the music and so forth that hopes to shortcut all of these things before they ever occur or get you ahead. But we also know by practical experience that we've all had encounters with dancers, other callers, people on the floor, one way or the other at our dances, and more often than not, we wish we had done them better at the time. One of my two majors in college was history, and there is a Prussian military strategist named Clausewitz that wrote some of the military theory that people use. One of the things that he wrote is that a battle plan never survives contact with the enemy. What we are going to be presenting here today are suggestions and approaches and strategies, but realize that they're not unique to the situation that you're going to face. It may give you some guidance in how to deal with it, how to approach it, and how to work with it, but the plan that works this time may not work the next time when you hit what you think is a similar situation, because those aren't necessarily similar individuals when you get up to it. Clausewitz also had another interesting little advantage, which I am not really remembering at this point, oh well, I'll come back to it soon, but the handout we gave you is information from Dale Carnegie's book of How to Win Friends and Influence People. As trite as that sounds, that's a book that's been out since '36, yet it has lots of valuable strategies for dealing with people and one of the strategies that lists down, if you go to the you go to the second page where 9 ways to change people without giving offense, and then and about halfway down it says, let the other person save face. Clausewitz said that you always leave your enemy a place to retreat, because you never surround him and make him fight to the death. If he has no place where to go to save face, then he has no choice but to continue to argue to try to win his argument. So one of the strategies with dealing people is that If I know of a difficult individual on the floor that is difficult to correct in position, and so I will go, oh, you thought it was this. And that gives him the opportunity to save face. He's not a bad dancer. He just made an incorrect decision for the place of his abilities and so forth. So he doesn't feel like that he failed. It's that he sees where he made the mistake, and he's got a way to gracefully get to the correct spot without feeling like that he lost face while he was out on the floor there. That's just one example of it. But you always leave people with a place to retreat to in an argumentative situation. Yes, you may feel wonderfully gratified at the moment at winning the argument, but in reality, what did you win at that moment? Really nothing. And so finding ways to let people save face in a confrontational situation is always an ideal approach to things. Sometimes those military books have some kind of meaning, and they can be applied in other places. I'm not going to bore you by going through everything on the win, friends, and influence people. The one thing I do want to read to you, and this is a study that's available online. If you'll Google to, actually it's interesting, the very name of our topic of dealing with difficult people, when I Google that, I got about 2 million hits, and they're all on the subject matter. This is a really popular topic now, and particularly a number of universities are doing studies on it. And the one I found that was very good was a study done by Iowa State, and it's titled Understanding Difficult Behavior. And in that, it's about a 50-page report, and it's not loaded down with stats. That's the wonderful thing about this. This one's very readable. And in it, they go through and create some labels for personality types to have to deal with. One is the Sherman tank. The Sherman tank's behavior spells attack. They behave in an abusive, abrupt, intimidating, and contemptuous manner and leave their victims on the defensive, feeling overwhelmed and powerless. They have a strong driving need to prove themselves and to others that they're always right. And there's more description here and so forth, and you can go to that. They describe another personality as the exploder. The exploder behavior is the equivalent of a temper tantrum. The outbursts are filled with rage and barely seem under control. At times, exploders can lose control and throw things about, shout, say regrettable things, even strike others. And they usually react in this situation when they feel themselves thwarted or threatened. Then there's the complainer. The complainer finds fault with everything from how you're doing your job to the weather. And always someone else should be doing something or not doing something. They're really unable to engage in effective problem-solving dialogue. They talk about the clam. The clam is the person who reacts to your suggestions or questions or attempts to engage in a conversation with silence or a grunt or some other non-committal yes or no. It's designed by the person that's using that to avoid painful interpersonal situations. The wet blanket responds to any questions or proposal with a quick negative response. They usually say it won't work or it's no use. Wet blankets feel like everything is out of their control. And the study goes on to describe personalities that have several of these different attributes, how you might deal with them in a problem-solving kind of situation. And it's a very good paper, and it's really written in English as opposed to Jargonese. It's Understanding Difficult Behavior, and it was a study done by Iowa State. And so, and it's on the first list of websites when you hit dealing with difficult people on a Google topic. And so those are the two that I found that were really interesting as far as of developing tactics to deal with different personalities in these situations. We all have examples of people we had confrontations with. Whether it goes to the point of I've had occasions where there were people that drank before coming to dances. And I developed one way to deal with it, then I did something different, then I did a different thing another time. Well, the reason I went to the second one, because the first one didn't work, the second time I wrote someone a letter and their behavior turned around 180 degrees, and I thought, hey, I finally got it. And the letter was written, I don't know whether it's your mouthwash or some medicine you're taking, but there are people that are making comments that they're smelling alcohol smells or whatever, and in square dancing this, you could, and so, the letter was really not threatening, and it really worked well with this individual. So I had it happen again a couple years later. Used the same letter. They quit the lessons. Took another couple with them. And I got a nasty letter back too. So, like Clausewitz says, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to adapt each strategy to every situation. Sometimes they don't work. But strategizing ahead of time is perhaps the only way to deal with it. We all get into situations where we hit the problem off the cuff. We have no prep time for it. Reading articles like this, which talk about understanding difficult behaviors and getting an idea of what those personalities are like, may give you some sense of how to deal with one when you hit them. And so it's kind of like getting information in a caller's college that has no application to your calling career until 10 years down the road. And then you remember they said something about this. And so it's good to strategize ahead of time as how you're going to deal with someone in these type of situations. And then you're a little less caught off guard. You don't necessarily have to think everything out ahead of time. There is some way of handling things. I think one of the best individuals in this organization at handling any kind of conversational situation is Clark Baker. Clark normally has you repeat back things you said, or he repeats back rather what you said before he goes on and expresses his own opinion. Number one, that slows down any situation. Usually one of the problems that happens in a confrontational situation is that it speeds up too quickly. It gets out of hand too quick, and you rapidly reach the point of no return far too quickly for you to control. One of the ways to do it is to slow it down. The way Clark slows it down is that before he ever replies to anything he says, he summarizes what you've said and makes you agree that that's what you said. First off, it's hard to reach a boiling point with that. Secondly, it's saying to the other person that you're listening to what they're saying. It's a great communication tactic, and it's one you can easily apply. It also keeps you from rushing to the boiling point and lets you stay under control. And so, and Clark does a number of other things strategy-wise in dealing with you conversationally. The discussion never gets out of hand. And if I can summarize anything, that's the approach you need to do in any situation. Now, yes, it may be an emergency thing that you got to intervene in and so forth, and it does call for quick reactions. But more often than not, there's no need for speed. And you remember the adage that speed kills. As long as you leave a place for the people to retreat from and save face, and as long as you slow down the process, you got an odds-on chance of dealing with any individual that's in this situation with you. You want to take a turn?
You take a drink. Thanks. That's definitely a good idea to slow things down. One of the biggest things you need to do is to control your reactions. And despite what you may think at the time, you are in control of your actions and reactions. And if you give that control to the other person, remember you're giving that control to them. They cannot control you unless you let them. And I know in this situation it's very hard to remember that, so it's definitely something you need to remind yourself. I mean, if somebody's standing there yelling at you, it's very difficult to control your reaction and say not yell back or just totally shut yourself down, whatever your particular reaction is. That's something my husband and I use all the time with our daughter, because she always feels that whoever is talking to her is controlling her. I don't know that she feels that way consciously, but we can see it when she reacts, and we try to let her know that she's allowing the person to control her, not that they are actually controlling. You can't control that difficult person either unless they let you, which they're probably not going to. But you do work with controlling the encounter and the outcome of that encounter. Sometimes you do need to take a break even. If someone's yelling at you, you may need to say, I really can't discuss this with you at this time. When you're calm, I will be glad to sit down and talk to you. None of us like to be yelled at, so that's certainly a way. It doesn't always work. They may continue to yell at you, but you need to try to cut the conversation off for now and come back later is a possibility. And I certainly do not put up with abusive language. I worked for many years where I was on the phone a long time, a lot of the day, and that was one thing I would never put up with. Fortunately, I never had to put up with it very often, or never was subjected to it very often. But when I was, my comment to them was, if that's the way you want to speak to me, I will hang up the phone if you speak to me in that manner. And certainly even face to face, I will walk away. I mean, I will tell them that that's what I'm going to do, but if that continues, I will not put up with that. I don't need to. Certainly in my position as caller's taught, nobody's paying me enough to put up with that. And even as a caller, nobody's paying you enough to do that, because I know what you guys are getting paid, and nobody's paying you enough. I don't think there's enough money in the world to say that you should be yelled at or someone can use abusive language to you. That's just not something I would say is acceptable. You do need to remember, like Mike said, you need to give people a place to go to save face. Well, depending on what the discussion is, you also need to remember that maybe in the middle of the club is not the place. You know, take them outside. It could be a situation that you don't want everybody in the club to hear, or they don't want everybody in the club to hear. And then there's other times that you want a witness. You want somebody to know what was said. You know, if you're dealing with someone who constantly tells lies, you don't want to be in a private situation. You want other people to hear what that person said, so that 2 weeks later, when they're trying to say that you said something else, there's 10 other people that can say, that's not what she said A, B, C, you know. So you need to see what the situation is and decide whether it needs to be taken outside, as it were, and I don't mean for a rumble, just for privacy, or whether you need that public forum so that your side, so that what you said is not distorted. You also need to remember you need to make some decisions about when you can handle the situation and when you can't. I cannot always handle the situation. I'm speaking, of course, from the dancing point, but that's true in workplaces too. I don't have any authority at all. The people that have authority in my life, in my square dance life, certainly the caller, and certainly in our case, we deal with all dancer-run clubs, so the officers are the authority. Now, if you're a caller-run club, then you definitely have more authority than the dancers do, and so you do need to look at those situations. There are definitely some situations where I will refer to Larry. I will say, you know, you're going to have to talk to Larry about that. You know, he's the one that's up there calling. I can't tell him what to call if that's, say, the issue. There's a lot of things that dancers come to me before they go to their officers, but if there's officers of a club, I have no authority to overrule them. And I will say, you need to go talk to your executive board, because they made those rules that you're not happy about. You need to take care of that. I've had people come to me and say, geez, we really didn't like the fill-in caller last week. And I'll say, well, you need to talk to your president or your vice president, because they hired that person. And that can be a dispute if they really, really felt they were tied up in knots. It's usually not a dispute situation in that case. They just maybe didn't like who was there, which I suppose is a compliment to Larry, that they are much happier with him. And you also sometimes just have to agree to disagree. You're not always going to come out with agreement. And sometimes it doesn't matter. If they want, and sometimes people want to vent, they just want to tell you how they feel. They may not expect you to be able to solve the situation. They just want to let you know they're not happy, and they'll let you know in no uncertain terms that they're not happy. So those are different things that you have to kind of feel your way on. And I'm very happy that I sometimes can refer things to other people, because I'm not very good with confrontation. So I do my best, and like I say, if I can refer it, I do. Maybe it's a cop-out, but if you are having a discussion, Mike said slow it down. Well, one thing to slow it down is don't feel you have to fill every quiet moment. Take a minute or 30 seconds, whatever it is, and think before you speak, because once those words are out of your mouth, it's too late to take them back. You can backpedal and whatever, but those words have been spoken. So Clark's way of repeating back is a very good one. It's a lot of what I read refers to that. Speak back so that they know that you understood, or if in fact you didn't understand, they can correct you. Or maybe they realized then that they said something that they didn't mean to say, or they said it in a way they didn't want to say it. But also just being quiet while they speak, for sure. Don't interrupt. If you let them talk and talk and talk, it gives you that much more time to think about what you want to say, and to say things in a way that are not going to be hurtful, because you never want to make things personal. You can tell people how you feel about the situation, but you don't want to make it personal and say, well, you're just a bad dancer. I don't know, that's not probably a good good example, but you don't want anything to be personal. It's always about the situation, not about the person you're talking to, and that's a really important thing. The other important thing is that you need not to take everything personally that's being said to you. You need to understand that maybe the person is having a really bad situation, whether it's at home or at their workplace or whatever, and for whatever reason, it's just come out to you right now. They're having something bad going on in their lives, possibly, and you need to remember that they just maybe need to scream and yell a little bit. I don't like that, and I'll tell them not, that I'll come back later, but if they're just talking to you, they may need to talk for 5 minutes and tell you what the problem is that they could have told you in 30 seconds. But if they talk, they wind down, and you've also had time to think about how to respond to what they've said, and that makes it a better situation, so that you're not saying things. Because, of course, if somebody's yelling at you or really insulting you or someone you care about, it's very difficult to say something that's not hurtful back. And so the longer they talk, the better you're better able to respond in a way that doesn't hurt them. One of the things I read is to treat this person, your enemies, in this case a difficult person, because I wouldn't like to think that any of the dancers are my enemy, or even people that I worked with, but treat them as you would a friend. This disarms them, because they're expecting, if they're attacking you, they're expecting you to attack back. But if you're treating them smiling, that's not always a good thing. But in a lot of cases, you can smile and respond back as if they were your friend, and that kind of takes the wind out of most people. Some of what I read said things about smiling. Well, sometimes smiling is not going to work. If they're very upset about things, a smile, I don't know. I'm not sure a smile always works. There are situations where it will, but I can think that it may make them think that you're not really seriously listening to what they're saying. So you need to think about the situation and decide which way you want to go. One thing I would definitely say is stay out of rumors. don't pass rumors and don't listen to rumors. I think that'll help avoid problems within clubs and workplaces and that type of thing. So I try very hard not to listen to rumors. And sometimes people do just want attention and they just want to vent, and that's kind of a way to let them have their say, and then sometimes you don't even have to respond. So, and as I said, the biggest thing is to control your reactions, because that's the one thing in the whole situation that you can control. If your reactions are calm, not personal, not emotional, then that controls the situation, and it will hopefully diffuse things and make it easier to resolve whatever the issue might be.
It's interesting. One of the things that Kathy pointed out is that this doesn't have to be passive reaction upon your part. Sometimes actions taken to head off or prevent stuff from occurring in the first place is the best way of approaching a problem. My daughter Christy teaches at a daycare center. She's also the music teacher there. And so she did a square dance program with the kids across the summer. And so there were the kindergarten through third graders, and then there was the fourth, fifth, and sixth graders. And that was a group she was expecting to have trouble with, particularly one individual who was just someone that was always very disruptive in the class. And so she didn't plan out her answer, but the thing was that she was prepared to have a problem here. So he came in the door, and they're, of course, he's getting kids to do square dance at that age, and they're all going yuck and whatever and the whole bit. And so he walks in the door and says, "Okay, girls, I'm here," whatever. And so, and she goes, "That's right, pick a partner." And it totally stunned him. It was, you need to pick a partner, so pick one. And he was stunned into silence. And she said, "Well, since you're obviously not ready to do that, sit down and I'll sign you a partner like everybody else." And totally preempted any kind of problem or confrontation. And so there are times you can strategize ahead of time to prevent anything from occurring. Sometimes you do attack, but you attack in a preemptive, controlled way so that nothing gets out of control in the first place. I'm sure that you all have had dozens of encounters with people, some that were very successful, which would be wonderful you shared the stories, and some that weren't, and we can problem solve together. So I think that can be the other part of this panel here. So we have a volunteer to play Phil Donahue. Good. And yes, we're aware of your grandchild. Like I said, preemptive. Wait, Ted, try now. No, that's not working.
One. Oh, finally made it. Tidvale, Arizona, formerly from Indiana. What Kathy said about let them talk is very good, because people have to talk. One of the things, I was a supervisor in GM for 17 years, and that was one of the management skills that we learned, is let people talk. And sometimes they'll talk themselves right into a hole, and they'll find out for themselves that what they're trying to promote isn't going to work. You can ask them certain questions. Say, "What can you do this with this program," or whatever they're doing? "What happens if you do this or that?" And make them sell that program to you like a salesman, because that's part of anything. We just came from a leadership, and if you have an idea, then you sell that idea. Don't just say, "Well, this is what we're going to do." You sell it, and you show them that it's going to work. Make this guy sell you the program. A lot of times they'll talk themselves right out of it.
Bruce Simpers, Ellicott City. How do you handle when you've got one dancer that is out of position. You don't really want to call them by name to draw the attention to them that they've made a mistake, but you want the success of the square too.
Well, it depends upon how far they're gone. If they're simply facing the wrong direction, the good old up to the middle and back will suddenly make them dawn there's nobody to work with. And so it's sometimes the situation can be created to be self-correcting because the next call has an obvious solution for them to be able to do it. I mean, obviously, if they're facing the wrong direction and the next call is a star through, then they have to turn around to be able to function. And it's something they can correct quickly. And so, and you have to be in control of yourself choreographically to be able to apply that. I mean, if you're in the middle of a module, you're leaving the module for the benefit of this one person. Now, if this is a class situation, you got one square on the floor, then you need to do that. If it's 10 squares on the floor and you can't afford to dole out all of this extra care for one person of 10 squares. And sometimes you need to, people grow by mistakes. It depends upon whether they survive the mistake. And so they have to be aware that I must be doing something wrong because I'm always looking the wrong way when I'm done with this call. And so it's sometimes you have to allow the mistake to occur. We do that with children growing up. We don't, the child that's always saved from falling on the floor when he's first learning to walk never learns to walk. He has to have some of the downside of it to appreciate the victory that he's going to have later on. And so, on the other hand, if he's in next square, then obviously for safety's sake, you got to get him out of there, back in the other place. I think it's very situational. It's whether you approach it from the philosophy of, are you there for his benefit, or are you trying to get a dig in?
I'll kind of tell you a few things that Larry does when he's calling. Depends on the group, of course. He does, in our one club, have one guy that he can pick on without having a problem. He knows, it's kind of, we all pick on him in fun. He's a very good dancer, so it's not a problem. Sometimes Larry will use him, and he'll say, Pete, could you turn so-and-so around? You misled him, or something of that nature. Another thing he'll do is say one couple is half sashayed and he really wants normal couples. He'll say, everybody's supposed to be in normal couples now. Then he's not using a name, but that gives them a chance. Or everybody should be facing out. Does a walk and dodge and two people are facing in. Everybody should be facing out. So therefore, they know that they need to turn around without names. Obviously, the people in their square know who they are, but they already knew because they knew they were facing the wrong way anyway. And like Mike said, if you get 10 squares on the floor, you may just also choose to let that square go down. And hopefully they know to get in lines and you can come back and pick them up.
The other thing, though, too, is if I'm picking on everyone, then no one's soloed out. It's that John turn around and Joe and Jean do this and Jane do this and whatever. Then no one is felt in particularly singled out. It was something. So and I think with some of my groups that I teach regularly or workshop regularly with, it's kind of that it's not unusual for your name to be called out. And so because but it's an attempt not to it's just simply to control the teaching situation so that we can get back to the right spot. One of the things you got to realize that if you called something that's had that much of a problem, then the obvious thing you need to do is to do it over. Because, obviously there are mistakes going on there and it didn't come through. So you get out of the situation, come back, and let's approach the problem again because obviously I did something wrong. So. Ted?
Yeah, as we've always been taught that if Cindy here makes mistakes, that we always address the issue on that mistake, and we show the correct example. I follow the lead of another caller who says, Cindy, I'm glad you did that. Hope you did it on purpose. And I want to show everybody the correct way to do it. And I use this person to show everybody the correct way to do what I want them to do. And so I do, in fact, address the person that makes the mistake. But I do it in a favorable manner and complimenting that person for doing what they did.
Sometimes I actually do the demo with the person that has the biggest problem, so that I've got a chance to get out there and do the correction. So, are you headed for Stu?
Stu Shackley, Brandenburg, Kentucky. There are a couple of situations that I've encountered, and I handle them differently. And one was successful, and the other one wasn't. We had a class that was going on, and we had one fella in there that was a joker, that he liked to joke around. And every time I'd say, "Gents, make a right-hand star," he'd put the left hand in. And I'd say, no, Kelly, the other right hand. And we got a chuckle out of the people. They'd laugh at Kelly because he put the wrong hand in the star. Well, one night they asked me if they could tape the teaching session so they could do it in their basement. And I said, sure. So they taped it. And they got down in their basement another night during the week, and they were getting ready to go. And the call says, "Gents, make a right-hand star." And of course, Kelly puts the wrong hand in, and the tape says, no, Kelly, the other right hand. And everybody looked around. Is Stu in here? But Kelly was using the wrong hand again. So this was something that but it worked, and everybody laughed about it. The second situation I had three groups working. One was a Cloud 3, which was mainstream. Or basic. Cloud 6 was the mainstream, and Cloud 9, which was the higher level, was the advanced. And this was before advanced even became popular. This was back in the 70s or so. And anyhow, in this advanced class, we had one couple that evidently didn't shower, didn't use any type of deodorant, and we had a difficult time getting anybody to dance in their square. So I felt it was necessary to try to do something about this. So I asked them to stay after the dance to help me clean up the room and move some of the equipment and so on. And they did. They stayed. And we got to talking. I said, we've had some complaints from the dancers that there are odors that are coming from some of the dancers that they don't like, and evidently they haven't taken a shower or they haven't used some type of deodorant. And they said, yeah, we noticed that. And so it sort of threw me off. I didn't know what to say next. So, but consequently, I lost control rather quickly. But consequently, that was the cause for eventually the group to disband, because the people got to the point where they would not dance in a square with these people, and these people were continuing to come. So that was an unsuccessful situation for me.
Behind you, Stu, Gloria.
Thank you. Gloria Roth. I am not known for being tactful. I come on very strong, and it's a fault. It's also the reason I am who I am, I guess. Anyway, a similar situation of Stu's that worked totally the opposite way, Stu. The couple came to a dance camp, and I had a campground, so they were right there on the camp, and so I know that there were showers, and it was summer, and it was unbearable. I mean, even on the platform, it was unbearable to be in that same room with. And he always wore. It looked like a clean white T-shirt, which was allowable in summer camp dancing. And finally, I thought, and they are the nicest people. They have two daughters that they were bringing up because their parents who were like a brother or sister or something to this couple, got killed in a car crash, and this couple took on these two young girls, and I mean, just the most wonderful people. And my goodness, I thought by about the third day, I knew we were going to lose this week. The dancers were going to leave because they were not going to continue. It wasn't. We won't go into what the odor was, but it was really bad. I mean, bad, the worst I've ever smelled in my life. So I took them outside, nice atmosphere overlooking the water, and I said, you know, you people, they were new dancers. You know, they had graduated from a class in Halifax earlier that season. And so I said to them, I have to tell you something that's going to really hurt you, but it hurts me. So, you know, whatever I said, she was horrified. Why, she said, Wilf takes a shower. Gloria, we change clothes every day. And I said, then you've got to change his deodorant because there is something wrong here, you know, and I don't want you to go away and I don't want you to get mad at me, but please, you've got to do something because the other people are complaining. They went back. I saw their vehicle leave the campground shortly after, and I thought, well, not the camper, but just the thing that towed their camper. And they came back. There was never another odor from that man. And they went on to be the chairman of the Canadian National Convention when it was held in Halifax. They write to me. They come to visit me. So it worked out, you know. And so sometimes when I'm outspoken, you know, it's very effective. So it can work the other way if you're of a certain personality, you know.
But did you notice what Gloria did? It was the point I made earlier about leaving a place for the enemy to retreat from, is that she took all the curse off of it. She in her introductory remarks is that look, you know, I really love you all to death and all the other things, and energetically involved herself with them to the point that they knew that she was interested in their well-being there as dancers. And yes, it was a problem that she had to address and deal with, but at the same time, they were given every place to feel comfortable in the situation. Surely Gloria wasn't comfortable having to approach it and do it or anything else, but she made them feel comfortable with it, and the results ended up being better than you could have expected to begin with.
We do have one of our dancers in one of our clubs, an older man. I have heard he still lives with his mother, so, I mean, he's single. He comes and he smells, and one of the male officers talks to him when it gets to a point where everyone is complaining. And then he's good for a while, and then it happens again. And a couple weeks ago, I had to go to the president and say, you know, I'm getting complaints about Frank again, and I'm thinking there's no way I'm going to embarrass him that much. In that case, I think, you know, one of the men needs to be the one that approaches him because he's a very shy man. I can't imagine that he would ever come back if one of the women in the club approached him with that information. So when it needs to be done, one of the gentlemen in the club approaches him and lets him know that it's becoming a problem again. So, you know, you need to look at that too. Say if one of the ladies is offensive, then obviously one of the gentlemen is not the right person to approach them. So the right person needs to approach.
A suggestion that I made to one couple, this was not near as bad, but I suggested that they bring a second shirt because we have, you know, rooms and closets and things, and also to bring deodorant. And halfway through a dance, he would go into the men's room, take his shirt, and change and use his deodorant. And you know, it worked out, as I say, worked out.
Daryl?
Old callers have anecdotes, don't we? We all have an anecdote. Now, yeah, right.
You're right.
Okay. I'm sorry, Daryl Clendenin, Portland, Oregon. 1R Daryl. That seems to have stuck with us for a long time, John. Anyway, one I'd like to share with you, and I know that you've all had this happen to you. At one of my workshop groups, this is a long time ago, I had dancers coming up to me during the breaks. Daryl, you're going to have to do something about that couple. They are never going to learn. I said, hey, we had about, 6 or 8 squares in the workshop group at that time. I said, just pass them around. Don't worry about it. You don't have to get in the same square with them every time. Some people don't learn quite as quickly as others, right? Give them time. They'll pick it up. They never did get to be really good dancers, but they did get to where they weren't breaking down the square every time they were in it. and they went on to plus level or whatever it was at the time. And about a year later, that couple came up to me during one of the breaks in one of the dances, and they said to me, "Daryl, you're going to have to do something about that one couple over there. They're never going to learn." True story.
There's a lady right here, Bear. There you go.
Cynthia Schrader, Anago, Wisconsin. I'm getting feedback. We have a couple in our club that I started with before I became a caller that was the president of this club for many, 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 many years. And they are older couple, and I am trying to, now as a caller, I kind of just ignore things because I, as a dancer, had a say in the club, and now as a caller, I don't. I'm not the caller for this club, but I had come out of this club. The couple tends to be overbearing and bossy, and they come across as saying, "Do it my way," or "Don't come." And we have lost dancers because of them. And I don't know quite how to approach them or work with them. They have gone to the point where teenagers have come into the club and danced. I had 5 of my kids go into the club, and she says, "Well, they shouldn't be dancing. They're not wearing square dance clothes," or something that just belittles them. And we've had adults told, "Well, you're not wearing a square dance dress. You shouldn't be here." And that particular couple has gone to the point where the husband comes to the dance. The wife will stay home if she knows that the president's wife is going to be there. And when they find out that the president and his wife are gone on a trip, which they tend to take a lot during the year, then the wife will come. I'd like a little feedback and help on what do you think we could do to help this situation.
Well, as far as the dress code, I have worked with all of our clubs. I, for a long time, rarely went in square dance clothes. Our Monday club is in San Francisco. We have had, over the years when we started classes, even when they were through with class, younger people, I won't say teenagers, but younger people, and they were riding mass transit to come to the dance. In some cases, they were coming directly from work. And my answer to the people who complained to me was, "I don't care. They're dressed, they don't smell, and they're here, and they're young." So what I did as an example is, one week I'd come in my blue jeans, and one week I'd come as if I had come straight from work, which was high heels and a business suit. Another week I would dress in nice slacks. I started wearing some prairie skirts. I wore different things every week because the club obviously was looking at me as the caller's taw to set an example, and they had complained to me. So I felt that by dressing differently every week, they were getting the idea that it really didn't matter what you wear. And I've done that with our other 2 clubs also, because we are at a point where we need to be accepting. And I've also found that and definitely in our Monday group, if we gave them 2 or 3 years, almost every one of them at least went to wearing prairie skirts. But they had to have the time to get to the point that they were comfortable with that they could figure out how to lug the clothing, whatever it might be, on Munibus or the BART or whatever, however they were getting to the dance. So that was an example that I used, and I was in a position to do that. It's probably a little more difficult for you as a caller. But, if you've got teenagers, if they're clean and they're dressed in something appropriate. I mean, there's some things that teenagers are wearing that would not be appropriate at the dance, in which case I think you'd need to speak to them. But I think we should say, hallelujah, you've got some teenagers in the club, and the heck with it. That would be my answer.
Does this club have elections? Yes. And they're constantly reelected?
Yes. Well
then
it's a small club. We only have about 20 active couples.
Well, but
and
the people that are the members of the clubs are, if they're continuing to vote them back into the place. Now, I realize some of that, if somebody's willing to do a job, the attitude nowadays is let them do the job. If the hang-up is over clothing, and that's not only the sole issue, but even if there are some other issues too that you want to talk about, the CALLERLAB market group focus groups, information that came back, particularly in the area of dropped out dancers, labeled the problem as other dancers. Callers were irrelevant to dancers dropping out. And maybe it's a case that these people just need to take a step back and look at the big picture. That, it was a revelation for me to read the document. And yes, there's things, we know why dancers drop. It's clicks, it's not being able to go and do things with the clubs, or they're pushed into a hurry into officership or onto banner raids and all those other things, except getting it all on a piece of paper in front of you and being presented that way was a revealing piece of information. And it might be good document to hand to these people and say, read this, look at it. If the dances are smaller than they were years ago, maybe there's a reason for it. And maybe the reason is, like Pogo said, is us. and maybe they might be the revelation. A verbal confrontation might be the wrong approach, but give me something that they can read on their own time that talks about it. It may not cause any kind of miracle of change. On the other hand, you never know until you try. And what are you wasting? Pieces of paper when it comes down to it. But it's some other way of approaching the problem.
Okay, this is Cynthia Schrader from Wisconsin again. I've also now been put in the position as a caller that my children and grandchildren that are dancing should appear as square dancers. So if they're coming with me to the dance, they should be dressed. And I am again believing that as long as they're coming, let them come. I try to monitor what they're wearing to the dance. I don't want raggy blue jeans and holes in the pants kind of a thing. In fact, we've kind of, in our state, said none of these, the big pocket type jeans and things aren't allowed. A nice pair of blue jeans or something is fine, but they didn't want these big pocketed type things because they can get in the way in the dance. And especially like my 13-year-old, it's really difficult. I don't want to wear that. And I'm telling her, well, at least put a skirt on. Well, can I wear this skirt? And she comes down in something really black and slinky, and I'm going, no. Go put on this other one. So I try to lead her in the right direction, what would be an appropriate choice, and that seems to satisfy the other dancers, but occasionally this one couple does still make comments. And I have gotten to where I won't go to the dance myself because she tends to make me uncomfortable when I'm there. So, okay.
One thing we haven't really kind of talked about are our own personal hot buttons. Mine is sound. When I was a teen, I was playing football and I got a twig of a tree in my ear and punctured an eardrum and so forth. Anyway, I got hearing loss in both ears, and I've never been comfortable with hearing aids. I've tried them out. I don't like the sound I hear out of it. I feel removed from what I'm hearing, and so when I go to a dance and set up, I set the sound up to where I like it. I feel like I'm hearing everything, and then I turn everything down. Because if I'm hearing it comfortably, then it's too loud. And I try to watch, but every once in a while you slip on a label that's got that real trebly sound to it or whatever it is, piercing, and you forget to turn everything back on that, whatever person distracted you before you could do that thought and start the tip. And so there are people that come up and they go, well, will you please turn it down? And then there's others that come up violently. And then there's the guy on the floor sticking his finger in his ears. And those are the ones, whether it doesn't have to be that issue with you, but though everybody has those kind of hot buttons that goes right to the heart of your soul. And if the microphone could become a weapon at that point of time, you would use it without any malice aforethought. and so I've had to come up with ways of how I will deal with the situation. I have a rule now that I stop and look at everything on the turntable, look at the record, did I leave the settings from someone other record on the turntable beforehand? Exactly where everything is, and did I use a piece of music that was much louder, and I really do need to turn it down again. And my level always, the one question I'm asking at that point in time to myself is, was I comfortable? Well, then it must have been too loud. So keep control, but I'm still angry. I still need to go someplace and get myself collected from the situation. And it still doesn't mean that you solve the problem with that individual, because there are people out there with oversensitive hearing too. And why they always square up in the square in front of you or in front of the speaker is beyond me. And sometimes I say that to them. I said, well, it was also, I've got 8 other squares to sound for here. So go back to the back. You may want to have the intimacy of being up front with me, but if it's too loud, try the back first.
You can also pretend to adjust the sound, and I'll tell you, that works. Sometimes people will say, Larry's too loud, and I'll say, oh, so-and-so said you were too loud. It's really fine. Larry will just reach over and make it look like he turned that sound down, and they're happy because it really wasn't too loud. Our clubs are predominantly older people who do have some hearing loss, and it annoys the heck out of me when the one with the worst hearing squares up at the back of the hall and expects Larry to turn it up so they can hear it. Then everybody else is complaining about the sound. So we've noticed, Larry will say, oh yeah, I'll turn it down. He doesn't really touch it. He just makes it look like it. And sometimes that's enough too.
I've always felt uncomfortable with doing that. But there's times where I'll do it with the record. I'll try to find the dullest record that I have sound-wise and put it on next so that it's not as bright and out there as the record previous. So it's somewhat the same situation. And sometimes it's just a matter of doing it. And a lot of times the first thing I'll do is I'll go to something with a minor key. And sometimes that also slows me down as well. It slows that down, and I've done nothing with the turntable, and it'll be sufficient for what they want. There's a number of different strategies, but you got to stay cool enough to do the strategy, because if you allow yourself to get angry, you're not going to go anywhere. And there's times where I've regretted what I've said to someone that I've smarted off because I just didn't feel, I have gone through an entire TIF being uncomfortable about hearing where the music was and dealing with it and so forth, and dealing with the sound situation. And the first person that comes up and jumps me it's like in my mind I'm going, how dare you? Because I worked my butt off on this situation beforehand. And it doesn't have to be about sound. We all carry hot buttons about stuff. And the question is can we stay in control of that hot button long enough to be able to deal with the whole situation? Yeah.
Ted Vail again. We had the same situation that Gloria was talking about. One of our male dancers was a truck driver, and he had an odor. And the club president come up and was telling us about it, and he said, I'll write him a letter. I said, I didn't like that idea. I didn't tell him that. I said, no, I'll take care of it for you. I said, I think I've got a way that I can do this. I didn't want him writing a letter. It's very impersonal. Writing letters, I don't like that idea. I said, we'll take care of it. So my wife and I did not catch him. We caught his wife out in the hall during the break. And we said, Helen, we need your help. What does that make you feel like when somebody says, we need your help? Okay, I'm a little important to this person, am I not? Sure. Okay, we need your help. We told her what the situation is. We said, you and Bill are good dancers. You're good club members. We didn't want to lose you in any manner. And we gave her a little talk and took care of the situation. Didn't have to confront Bill. Bill's dead, so it's immaterial. But they stayed around for a good many years with our club. We didn't lose anybody. But I just think the personal approach is better than anything you can do. Stick your neck out. A turtle never gets any place till he sticks his neck out.
Raybon and Dick Jones were doing a dance together, and Raybon had come early and put up the Hilton speakers, and Dick had just developed the color tone speakers, and so they were going to try them out at the dance. And so they unplugged the Hiltons but left them up and put the color tones up, and they're doing the dance, and between the pattern and the singer, this guy complains he can't hear. And Dick leans over to Ray and says, it's not that he can't hear, he can't dance. And so Ray went over to the unplugged Hilton, turned it at his square, he says, how's that? And he goes, hey, great. Did perfectly fine the rest of the evening. Sometimes it's just a case of impression and attitude as opposed to anything else. Thank you all for helping in brainstorming today, and hope you enjoyed the panel, and we'll see you all later.